Welcome to the Curious Case. I'm Davis. Tell me, have you ever trusted a secret you couldn't prove? Sometimes, silence protects more than truth ever could. Tonight, Miss Marple arrives in a village where every whisper sounds rehearsed, and every smile hides a shadow. So, pour your tea and listen closely. They said it was an accident, but someone lied. The clock ticked softly on the mantel. Its steady rhythm filled the quiet room. Miss Marple sat by the fire, pouring tea with care. The scent of bergamot drifted through the cottage. Outside, the wind moved the garden gate. Inside, the world was calm, almost too calm. Mrs. Dodds, the housekeeper, fussed with the cups. She always did when nervous. 3 spoons, miss, she said. Just as you like it. Marple nodded. Perfect. Thank you. Lady Bantry was already seated near the window. Her gloved hands rested over her purse. She spoke lightly, but her eyes didn't match the tone. They say the village is gossiping again, she said. About what? Marple asked. Oh, the usual. Lady Bantry sighed. Money, wills, and who's walking where they shouldn't. The words lingered. Marple's spoon paused in the cup. She gave a small smile. Wills are a winter topic, it seems. Mrs. Dodds sniffed. It's the cold, miss. Brings out all kinds of talk. Talk about what, exactly? Lady Bantry pressed. Mrs. Dodds hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. They say someone's expecting an inheritance. A large one. Marple looked up. And who is the fortunate soul? Mrs. Clement, said Mrs. Dodds quietly. Her husband's brother passed last week. No children. The estate goes to her. Lady Bantry nodded slowly. She's been visiting the solicitor daily. Seems too eager. Marple stirred her tea. Eagerness, or fear, perhaps. Lady Bantry frowned. Fear of what? Marple didn't answer right away. She simply watched the steam curl and fade. The clock ticked again, a small sound, precise, predictable, but under it something felt off. The stillness of the room was heavy now. Mrs. Dodds tried to fill the silence. She's been acting strange, she continued. How so? Marple asked. Walks late at night, takes the dog down the lane alone, says it clears her mind. Lady Bantry shook her head. In this weather? Foolishness. Marple's tone was calm, or reason disguised as habit. The fire popped quietly. The smell of tea mixed with the faint scent of smoke. Outside, the wind shifted again. A hinge creaked somewhere in the distance. Marple set down her cup. Her voice was almost gentle. When people repeat routines, it's rarely comfort they seek. It's control. Lady Bantry blinked. You think something's wrong with her? Marple gave a small nod. Not wrong, just unsettled. She rose from her chair and walked toward the window. Her reflection met her, eyes in the glass. A quiet mind cataloguing patterns, nothing more. The clock struck 4. Mrs. Dodds jumped slightly at the sound. A fork clattered on the table. No one spoke for a moment. Then, a faint sound came from outside, a dull metallic tap against the gate. Once, then again. Marple turned her head slowly toward the door. The air felt different. She looked back at Lady Bantry. Neither of them moved. The clock ticked on. A sound broke the calm. Something small but wrong. The scent of tea still hung in the room. Lady Bantry had left, her gloves forgotten on the chair. Mrs. Dodds cleared the cups, muttering to herself. Only Miss Marple remained seated, eyes on the small sideboard. Something there was different. The framed photograph of Mr. Sutherland's garden gone. She noticed its absence before she knew why. A faint square of dust marked where it had been. Mrs. Dodds, she said softly. Did you move the picture? The woman turned, startled. No, miss. I never touched that shelf. Marple's tone stayed even. Then someone else did. Mrs. Dodds frowned. No one's been in today except Lady Bantry. Did she look at it? She barely glanced that way. Talked more than she watched. Marple leaned closer, her eyes tracing the small patch of clean wood. Someone had lifted the frame recently. The dust told its own story, disturbed, uneven. Her mind logged it. A logical note. Nothing emotional. The clock struck again. Mrs. Dodds jumped slightly. Marple's gaze stayed on the sideboard. "Was there ever anything behind the photograph?" she asked. Mrs. Dodds shook her head. "Not that I recall. Just a nail, miss." Marple nodded. Her fingers brushed the surface. There a faint mark, circular, like a small coin pressed once and removed. Something metallic had rested there. Not a photo, not decoration, something deliberate. She straightened. "Mrs." Dodds watched, confused. "You think it matters?" Marple replied quietly. "Everything matters, until it doesn't." Outside, a carriage passed on the lane. The sound faded quickly. Inside, the cottage returned to stillness, but Marple's thoughts did not. She replayed the morning conversation. Mrs. Clement's inheritance. Late walks. Fear disguised as routine. Now a missing photograph, and perhaps something that once hid behind it. Patterns, she thought. Small things change first. That's how secrets begin to show. Mrs. Dodds broke the silence again. "Would you like more tea, miss?" Marple blinked. "No, thank you." Her mind was elsewhere, tracing logic through dust and habit. She moved toward the door. "Lock this behind me," she said. Mrs. Dodds looked uneasy. "Is something wrong?" Marple gave a faint smile. "Not yet, but something doesn't fit." The wind pushed against the windows. A soft rattle answered from the back of the house. Mrs. Dodds turned. That sound again. Marple paused at the threshold. Her eyes sharpened. The sound wasn't the wind. It was sharper, closer, intentional. She looked once more at the empty space on the wall. The pattern of dust told her what logic already suspected. Something had been taken. Recently, quietly. She couldn't explain it yet, but she would. The sound came again. 3 short knocks against the back door. Mrs. Dodds froze mid-step. Her hand tightened on the tray. "Probably the wind," she whispered. Marple's eyes stayed on the handle. "No," she said quietly. "The rhythm's too even." The smell of smoke drifted in faintly sharp, dry, unnatural. Marple crossed the floor, opened the latch. The door creaked. Cold air rushed in. On the step lay an envelope. No name, no seal. Just one fold, pressed flat. Mrs. Dodds leaned forward. "A letter." Marple nodded. "It was left, not delivered." She lifted it carefully. Her fingertips felt a faint impression. Letters, pressed deep into the paper. She turned toward the table. "Best lights here." Inside, 1 sheet. No greeting, no signature. Just a single line written in sharp pencil. It wasn't an accident. Mrs. Dodds gasped. "Accident? What accident?" Marple didn't reply. Her eyes scanned the handwriting, steady, deliberate, quick. Not panic, not guilt. Information. A statement of fact. "Who would write this?" Mrs. Dodds asked. Marple folded the page again. "Someone who knows something." She placed it flat on the table, aligning the corners. Precision always revealed intention. The knock came again, softer this time. Both women looked at the door, but no one stood there now. Only footprints in the frost, fading toward the lane. 2 sets. One small, one heavy. Marple stepped closer to the doorway. The smell of smoke was stronger now. She looked past the gate and saw it. A faint orange flicker behind the hedges. "Mrs. Dodds," she said. "Fetch your coat." The woman hesitated. "What is it?" Marple's voice was calm. "Fire." They hurried down the path. Snow crunched beneath their feet. The air was sharp, biting. The flicker grew brighter as they neared the bend. Then came the crack wood giving way, sudden and hollow. Smoke rose from behind the blacksmith's shed. A small cart stood there, burning at one wheel. The smell was heavy now, choking. Marple's eyes caught something beside it, a shape half hidden near the fence. She moved closer. Mrs. Dodds stopped short. "Dear Lord." The body lay face down in the snow. A scarf twisted tight around the neck. Marple knelt beside it. Her gloved hand brushed away the frost. She didn't speak. Logic first, emotion later. The fabric was torn. The scarf's end held a pin gold with a single green stone. She recognized it. Mrs. Clement's brooch. Marple straightened slowly, the paper still in her hand. The letter's words echoed. Back. It wasn't an accident. She knew then it was no accident. The smell of smoke still lingered near the shed. Constable Ward stood beside the body, taking notes. His pencil scratched the paper in short, nervous lines. Miss Marple watched quietly, her gloved hands clasped. Name's Mrs. Clement, Ward said. You knew her, I believe? Marple nodded once. Slightly. Afternoon teas, garden talks. Ward sighed. Seems a nasty accident. Fire spread too fast. Marple's tone was mild, and yet her scarf was tied. He looked puzzled. Could have snagged on something. Perhaps, she said softly, but the knot was deliberate. The constable shifted uneasily. Marple stepped closer to the snow. Her eyes traced the footprints near the fence, 2 distinct sets, one smaller, one heavier, both headed away from the scene. Only one returned. Ward followed her gaze. Tracks'll melt soon. Then we must think while they're fresh, she replied. From behind them came a voice. Oh, Miss Marple, I can't bear to look. It was Mrs. Dodds, trembling at the gate. Marple turned. Best stay back. The smoke's thick. But Mrs. Dodds had already stepped closer. Her face was pale, her eyes fixed on the scarf. That brooch, she whispered. It's the one she wore yesterday. Said it was her good luck charm. Marple studied her tone. She told you that herself? Yes. Said she'd never part with it. Not after Mrs. Dodds stopped suddenly. After what? Marple asked. The woman shook her head. Oh, nothing, miss. Just talk. Talk about what? Old things, Mrs. Dodds murmured. Before the will. Before her husband's brother died. Marple tilted her head. Interesting timing for sentiment, she said softly. The constable glanced between them. You think this connects to money? Marple didn't answer. She crouched again, lifting the edge of the scarf. No. Burn marks. No ash. The fire hadn't touched it. Ward frowned. So it started elsewhere. Likely, Marple replied. But not by chance. Mrs. Dodds wrung her hands. She was frightened lately, miss. Said she kept hearing footsteps near the shed at night. I told her it was the wind. Marple's eyes narrowed. And did she believe you? Mrs. Dodds hesitated. She said the wind doesn't wear boots. Marple straightened slowly. Logic, not fear, guided her tone. She expected someone, she said. Someone she didn't trust. Ward closed his notebook. We'll question the villagers. Someone must have seen her. Yes, Marple said calmly. But they'll speak carefully. Carefully? Marple looked toward the lane. When people protect each other, truth takes small steps. The constable frowned. You think they're hiding something? Marple met his eyes. I think they're choosing their words too well. She turned, toward the gate. The smell of smoke was thinning now, but the unease wasn't. Mrs. Dodds followed her gaze, whispering, What happens next, miss? Marple's answer was quiet. We listen. Closely. She noticed one word they avoided. The scent of polish hung in the hallway. Marple waited by the stairs, gloved hands folded neatly. The door creaked open. Mr. Ellis, the gardener, appeared with his hat in hand. He looked uneasy before he even spoke. Terrible thing, miss, he muttered. Didn't sleep a wink. Marple nodded politely. You tended Mrs. Clement's garden, I believe? Every week, he said. She liked things trimmed proper, paid on time. Was she alone last night? Ellis hesitated. Far as I know. Marple's eyes narrowed. You passed her cottage around dusk, didn't you? His gaze dropped. Might have done. I was on my way home. She was seen near the shed, Marple said evenly. Ellis shifted his hat. Could have been. Hard to tell in the dark. Yet you saw her coat, Marple continued. Blue wool, missing a button. He blinked, startled. How'd you know that? I didn't, Marple said quietly. You just told me. He froze, caught by his own words. The hallway clock ticked between them, slow and heavy. Marple's tone stayed calm. You noticed more than you admit, Mr. Ellis. He rubbed his palms together. It's not my business, miss. I keep out of things. Yet you spoke with her yesterday? His head lifted. Briefly, she was nervous. Asked about the gate latch. The one by the shed. Yes. Said someone tampered with it. Wanted it mended before nightfall. Marple's eyes steadied on him. Did you mend it? I meant to, he said. Didn't get the chance. Why not? He hesitated again. She told me not to. Said she'd handle it herself. Marple paused, thinking through the sequence. She asked you to fix it, she said slowly, then told you not to. He nodded. That's right. Did she say why? No, only that it wasn't safe to wait. The logic fit oddly. Fear first, then secrecy. A contradiction wrapped in caution. Marple let the silence stretch. Finally, Ellis sighed. I thought maybe she'd quarreled with someone. A letter came that morning. A letter? Yes. I saw the postman hand it to her. She looked pale after reading it. Marple leaned forward slightly. Did you see the sender's name? He shook his head. No, but I heard her mutter something strange. Said, not again. Then she burned the envelope. Marple's brows lifted. You're certain she burned it? Yes, miss. Right there in the stove. She didn't do that often? Never, he said firmly. She kept everything, even bills from years ago. Marple's mind connected two threads, the warning letter at the door and a second message gone to ash. She straightened. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. You've been helpful. He looked relieved. Glad to assist, miss. She gave a small nod, then turned toward the lighted study. At the desk, she opened her notebook. The scent of polish still lingered faintly. Her pen moved in quiet rhythm. She paused once, thinking. Then she wrote a note in silence, one name underlined twice. The air smelled faintly of damp earth. Miss Marple stood behind the blacksmith's shed again. The constable had finished his work, but she'd returned alone. Logic, not curiosity, brought her back. She moved carefully, her boots pressing neat prints in the mud. The ashes from the burned cart were cold now. Only grey flakes remained, scattered by the wind. She bent closer to the ground, examining the edges of the scorched wheel. There, something glimmered faintly beneath the debris. She brushed away the ash with her gloved fingers. A small metal object appeared, half buried in soot. A key, old brass, slightly bent. She held it to the light. Not a house key. Too small, more like a cabinet or drawer. She noted the ridges worn from frequent use. Someone had handled it often, recently. She wrapped it in a handkerchief and looked around. The soil near the fence was uneven. A shallow dent, no larger than a teacup. She knelt and touched the mark. Cold, fresh. Something had rested there briefly. Marple's voice was low, steady. One object taken, one left behind, she murmured. The pattern fit. The missing photograph from her sitting room. The empty space on the sideboard. Perhaps this key was part of that same absence. She stood, scanning the line of trees. Footprints crossed each other like thin puzzles in the mud. One set smaller, the other deeper, a man's likely. She followed them until the prints disappeared into gravel. Her thoughts organized themselves quietly. Mrs. Clement had feared someone. She'd received a letter. She'd burned it. Then she'd died by her own shed. Now, a key, hidden, forgotten, or dropped too soon. Marple walked back toward the cottage. At the door, she paused. The smell of earth gave way to the faint scent of soap from inside. Mrs. Dodds was sweeping the hallway, humming weakly. Mrs. Dodds, Marple said softly. The woman stopped. Yes, miss? Did Mrs. Clement ever mention keeping a locked drawer or box? Mrs. Dodds frowned. A box? Oh, yes. Wooden one. Kept near the window. In her bedroom? In the sewing room, she said. Always locked. Said it held old papers. Marple nodded. Do you know where the key was kept? No, miss, Mrs. Dodds replied. She never said. But I saw her open it once. Marple tilted her head. When? Last week, the woman said. Right before she started those walks. That detail landed cleanly. Last week, the same time the inheritance was discussed. Fear, again, disguised as habit. Marple slipped the brass key into her coat pocket. It felt cold against the fabric. Her eyes lifted toward the stairs. That sewing room would be next. She turned toward the narrow hallway. The floor creaked under her step. Then another sound followed. Not the broom, not the clock. She heard a step behind her. The smell of pipe smoke filled the cottage. Inspector Slack stood near the window, coat buttoned high. Constable Ward waited by the door, notebook open. Miss Marple sat opposite them, hands folded neatly. Slack tapped the ash from his pipe. So, he said, you found the body first? Marple nodded. With Mrs. Dodds, about an hour after the fire began. Slack grunted. And you believe it wasn't an accident? I do, Marple replied calmly. The evidence doesn't match the story. He raised an eyebrow. Such as? The scarf, Inspector. It wasn't burned. The knot was forced. Slack puffed slowly. Plenty of reasons for that. Panic. Confusion. Marple shook her head. Or intent. Ward scribbled the exchange word for word. Intent to what, miss? He asked. To silence, she said softly. Someone wanted her quiet. Slack looked toward the window. Outside, villagers had gathered by the lane. Small groups whispering, pointing, shaking their heads. Gossip spreads faster than flame, Marple thought. Slack sighed. Every one of them will have something to say, most of it nonsense. Some nonsense hides truth, Marple replied. Slack smirked. You've a habit of saying that. And you a habit of doubting it, she said gently. He gave a short chuckle. Fair enough. Ward looked up from his notebook. Postman claims he saw her yesterday afternoon. Near the green. At what time? Marple asked. 3:30, he said. Said she was carrying a parcel. Slack frowned. A parcel? Thought she burned her mail. Ward shrugged. Said it looked wrapped in brown paper. Marple's eyes sharpened. And after that, he didn't see where she went. Marple leaned forward slightly. She received one letter we know of, she said. The one we found at my door. Still no idea who sent it, Slack muttered. Marple nodded. Perhaps the same person who sent the other, the one she destroyed. Slack's jaw tightened. You're suggesting someone warned her? Or reminded her, Marple replied. A clock chimed faintly in the hall. The sound drew all three eyes for a moment. Mrs. Dodds entered, carrying a small tray. Her hands shook as she set it down. Tea, Inspector? Slack nodded. Much obliged. Marple's tone was mild. Mrs. Dodds, have you heard what people are saying? The woman's lips pressed thin. They say she knew too much. Ward stopped writing. Knew too much about what? Mrs. Dodds looked uneasy. About her late husband's accounts, and someone else's name on them. Slack's expression changed. Whose name? Mrs. Dodds hesitated. Mr. Ellis, they say. The gardener? Yes, sir. Folks said he'd been meeting her after dark. Arguing. Slack set his cup down sharply. She was seen with him? So they say, Mrs. Dodds whispered. Marple's gaze didn't move. She remembered Ellis's words. She told me not to mend the gate. Her logic aligned quickly. Fear, secrecy, money, and now, a link to Ellis. Slack straightened. We'll bring him in again. Marple didn't object. But in her mind, something clicked. Not the gossip, not the gate. One small line, buried in talk. A single statement changed everything. The cottage smelled faintly of ink and paper. Miss Marple sat at the writing table, her notebook open. Each page held a line of fact, a margin of doubt. Logic, she reminded herself, must come first. She listed what she knew. Mrs. Clement feared someone. She received 2 letters. She burned one. She kept the other long enough for it to reach Miss Marple's door. Then the contradictions began. Ellis claimed he saw her before dusk. Ward's postman said 3:30. 2 sightings, 1 hour apart, both alone. Impossible unless one of them lied. Marple tapped her pen. If Ellis spoke true, she left home twice. If the postman was right, she never returned before dark. The difference wasn't time, it was company. Someone had joined her between the green and the shed. She turned to another column. The scarf. The knot too tight for chance, the fire too late to hide intent. And the key. Small, brass, forgotten. A key without a lock, or a lock no one mentioned. She noted Mrs. Dodds's story next. Talk of arguments, hidden meetings, fear. Yet Mrs. Dodds said she'd never gone near the shed after dark. Marple paused. That wasn't true. The broom near the door had soot at the bristles. Someone had swept there this morning. She wrote slowly. Mrs. Dodds cleaned where she said she hadn't. Another line below it. Ellis mended nothing, yet the gate latch was fixed. She remembered the faint mark of fresh oil on the hinge. Someone had mended it after all. Not Ellis, not Clement, someone else. She drew a small box around the word someone. Logic demanded motive. Who benefits? The will favored Mrs. Clement, but also one other, her late husband's business partner. Name, Raymond Kerr. Kerr. The same man who visited the cottage last month. Just paperwork, he'd said. Marple's pen moved faster. She wrote his name, underlined once. A third person with access. One who understood the accounts. One who needed silence, not scandal. Her eyes drifted to the window. Outside, voices rose from the lane gossip, turning wild. She heard Ward's tone above the rest. Inspector says Ellis is under watch. Slack's reply was muffled, short. Blame was spreading like ash. Marple turned a fresh page. Facts, she thought. Separate them from noise. Ellis lied about time. Dodds lied about cleaning. The key linked to something hidden. And Kerr's name sat quietly inside the papers of the dead. Her hand stopped. The pieces fit, but one was missing. The silence of one person kept them apart. Not what they said, what they didn't. She leaned back, listening to the faint tick of the clock. It was always the same sound before truth arrived. She realized someone's alibi depended on silence. The faint smell of polish lingered in the hallway. Miss Marple stood by the stair rail, her notebook open. The house was quiet except for the soft tick of the hall clock. She reviewed each note carefully, reading between her own lines. One word caught her attention: key. She had assumed it belonged to a box in the sewing room. But what if it didn't? Logic shifted when one small thing moved. She walked to the sewing room. The door was half open. Dust lay evenly across the desk, except for one clean space. She noticed the outline of a square shape, small, shallow, gone. The box wasn't missing. It had been replaced. Something similar in size had sat there to disguise its absence. Marple leaned closer. A faint ring of oil marked the surface. Metal once rested there. Not wood, not fabric. Metal. She checked the key again. The ridges matched not a drawer but a case, something portable used often. She turned the brass piece over, feeling its faint, rough edge. Stamped near the rim were 3 tiny letters. R.K.E. Her mind clicked. Raymond Kerr Enterprises. The husband's business partner. The initials weren't random, they were proof of ownership. So the key hadn't belonged to Mrs. Clement. It belonged to him. And somehow she'd gotten hold of it. Marple closed her notebook. She pictured it all in logical order. Kerr visits the cottage last month, says it's about the will. Afterward, Mrs. Clement begins her nightly walks. Then the fire. Then the letter that reached Marple's door. It wasn't an accident. The puzzle turned itself inside out. The will was never the motive the ledger was. The late brother's accounts were tied to Kerr's firm. If exposed, he'd lose everything. If silenced, the secret stayed buried. Marple stood by the window. The lane outside was misted. Still. 2 villagers passed, whispering as they walked. She heard fragments. Fire. Inheritance. Poor woman. The gossip hid the truth as neatly as any alibi. She turned back toward the room. On the desk, a needle case glinted faintly beside a spool of thread. Nothing unusual except it wasn't there the last time she'd looked. Someone had entered the house since morning. She opened it. Inside lay a folded slip of paper, torn at the edge. Only half a line was visible. Pencil marks faint, hurried. It read, "He promised the lock would stay hidden." She froze, reading the words again. It wasn't a warning, it was a record. Not what was meant to be found, but what was left by mistake. She held it under the lamp. The handwriting matched the first letter, and the sentence ended mid-thought, as if interrupted. Someone had stopped her before she finished writing. Logic, once narrow, now opened. The clue had always been there. But it wasn't about what it said. She finally understood what the clue didn't say. The wind pressed against the window panes. It carried a low whistle through the cracks. Miss Marple sat alone in the parlour, the small key before her. Her teacup had gone cold. It didn't matter now. Logic had pointed her here to the simplest place. If the key belonged to Kerr, it would unlock something nearby. People hid truth close to where they lied. She rose, steady and calm. The clock struck 9. Each chime echoed softly through the house. Mrs. Dodds had gone home. Inspector Slack was due back in the morning. Marple took a small lantern from the table. The flame flickered once, then steadied. She crossed the hall, stopping near the sewing-room door. The handle turned with a faint click. Inside, the air felt colder. The smell of fabric and dust filled the space. Her eyes scanned the room methodically. Drawer, trunk, shelf, each checked and dismissed. Then she saw the low wooden stool near the corner. A rug was draped carelessly across it. She knelt, lifting the fabric edge. Beneath it, a thin metal latch glinted faintly. A hatch, small, built into the floorboards. Hidden under the rug and forgotten by habit, her voice was barely a whisper. Interesting. The key turned easily in the lock. A soft click answered. She lifted the panel. The hinges groaned, dry from years of silence. Inside was a narrow compartment. She held the lantern lower. Light fell on several folded papers tied with string. Not money, not letters, documents, business papers stamped with Kerr's initials, and beneath them a ledger, half-burned along one edge. She turned a page. Figures, signatures, and corrections. Some marked in 2 different inks. Fraud disguised as accounting. Kerr's company. Clement's estate. Linked by one hand. The logic formed cleanly. Mrs. Clement had discovered this. She had confronted him. And she had paid the price for knowing. Marple replaced the papers carefully, every corner aligned. Her mind noted what the discovery meant. Evidence of motive. Proof of deceit. And one more reason someone would risk everything to retrieve it. She lowered the hatch and stood. The floorboard creaked under her weight. She froze. The sound had come from the hallway, not the plank. The lantern's flame trembled slightly. A faint reflection crossed the doorframe. Movement. Slow. Careful. She waited. No words. No breath. Only the faint scrape of a shoe against wood. Marple moved quietly toward the door. The hall beyond was dim, the air colder still. She listened 1 second, then 2. A shadow slipped past the edge of light. Her hand tightened on the lantern. Her mind remained clear. Logic before fear. Observation before reaction. Still someone else was there. Someone who shouldn't be. She wasn't alone in the dark. The faint scent of lamp oil filled the hallway. Miss Marple stood still, her hand on the lantern. The figure stopped halfway down the corridor. A shadow moved then. A voice. "Miss Marple?" It was Mr. Ellis. His tone was uneven. Too light for the hour. "You startled me," she said quietly. "Did I?" he replied, smiling weakly. "Didn't expect to find anyone awake." Marple tilted her head. "Nor did I." Her eyes didn't leave his hands. They were dirty, faint streaks of soot still on the fingers. "Working late again?" she asked. He hesitated. "Had to check the shed. Thought I saw smoke." She nodded. "Ah, But that fire burned hours ago. Ellis blinked. Then I must have imagined it. Marple stepped closer. Or returned to something you left undone. His shoulders stiffened. You think I had anything to do with it? I think you know more than you've said, she replied evenly. He laughed once, sharp and thin. You think you've solved it then? Not yet, she said, but nearly. The hallway clock ticked between them. Ellis looked toward the door. Inspector will be back in the morning, he muttered. You can tell him whatever you like. Marple's tone stayed calm. I prefer truth to gossip. Truth, he repeated. You've been talking to Mrs. Dodds. She's got nothing but tales. Marple ignored the jab. You told me you didn't mend the gate, she said. He frowned. I didn't. She raised the small lantern higher. The hinge was oiled, she said. And you're the only man in the village who keeps blacksmith's grease. His face changed only slightly, but enough. I fixed it earlier, he said quickly, before she died. That's not what you said before. He took a step back. You twist things. No, she said softly. I just listened carefully. Ellis swallowed hard. All right, I fixed it. What of it? You did it after dark, Marple said. You can't prove that. You're right, she replied. But you can. He glared. You don't know what you're talking about. I know Mrs. Clement trusted you, she said. Enough to tell you about the box. His eyes widened. What box? Marple's tone stayed level. The one hidden under the floor. For a second, he didn't breathe. Then, I don't know anything about that. Marple's voice softened. You should have burned the papers when you had the chance. He froze completely now. How do you? Marple interrupted. Because they were business records. Not hers. Kerr's. Ellis stepped closer. Careful, Miss Marple. I'm always careful, she said. The silence stretched. He looked away first. When he spoke, his voice cracked slightly. She shouldn't have kept them, he muttered. She said she'd give them back. Marple's expression didn't change. She never got the chance, did she? He realized what he'd said only after it left his mouth. His face went white. One truth slipped out. Too late to take back. The faint smell of dust filled the study. Miss Marple sat before the open ledger, each figure neatly circled. She read it once more, slowly, like a recipe of deceit. Logic lined the margins. Money, fear, habit. 3 words repeated themselves across every clue. She noted Ellis first. Low wages, steady debt. A man who worked near everything worth hiding. He'd been paid in cash for small repairs. Too small to matter, too frequent to ignore. One payment came from Kerr's firm. Not for gardening, for silence. Next, Mrs. Dodds. Faithful housekeeper, full of stories, short on truth. She'd cleaned where she shouldn't have, destroyed what she didn't understand. Her loyalty wasn't to the dead, it was to comfort. And comfort had a price. Then Kerr, businessman, friend to the family. Signed documents in 2 hands, his and the brothers. If the accounts were exposed, the fraud would surface. Mrs. Clement found out. She threatened to report it. A warning letter arrived. Then the fire. Marple turned a page, keeping her logic plain. Mrs. Clement's fear was real, but not random. She had told Ellis. He, in turn, told Kerr. The link wasn't friendship, it was desperation. She recalled the timeline. The day before the death, Ellis mended the gate. That gave him access to the shed. He knew about the hidden floor box. He could have retrieved the ledger for Kerr. But something went wrong. The scarf, the brooch, the letter left behind. Too many. Signals for accident. Marple's pen hovered. She wrote the word, guilt, then drew an arrow to greed. Mrs. Dodds had said the villagers whispered of arguments, one argument at dusk, by the gate. That meant Kerr was in the village earlier than he claimed. Slack's report placed him miles away at that hour. Impossible, unless someone else lied for him. Marple reread the witness statements. Ellis said he saw no visitors that night. Yet the second set of footprints had larger treads than his. She pictured them clearly, the prints that returned to the lane. Kerr's boots were heavy, city-made, not village-worn. They matched. So Kerr came back. Ellis followed. Mrs. Clement confronted him. She showed the ledger. He grabbed it, the scarf, anything to stop her scream. Then Ellis, seeing the fire start, panicked and fled. The perfect storm of greed and fear. Marple's tone was calm even in her own thoughts. Money hides intent, she murmured, but guilt hides motive. She drew 3 lines in her notebook, connecting the names. Ellis, fear. Dodd, silence. Kerr, gain. Her hand paused above the page. She looked again at the neat triangle of ink. In every mystery, one name gains the most when truth burns. She knew who gained the most. The smell of rain drifted in from the open window. Inspector Slack returned just after dawn, boots heavy with mud. Miss Marple stood by the hearth, calm as ever. Ellis sat across from them, pale, eyes red from the night. Slack placed his hat on the table. "Well," he said, "we've checked Kerr's office. Nothing there." "Nothing?" Marple asked softly. "Empty safe. Clean as a whistle." She nodded slowly. Then someone warned him. Ellis shifted in his chair. "I told you I don't know anything about that." Slack ignored him. "We found burn marks near the shed, though. Fresh ones. Someone tried to destroy papers." Marple's gaze moved to Ellis. "Interesting," she said, "because the ledger wasn't among them." His jaw tightened. "I never touched any ledger." "Perhaps," Marple said mildly. "But you touched the lock." He glared. "That proves nothing." Slack leaned forward. "Maybe it proves enough." The clock ticked between them, steady and low. Marple opened her notebook. "You said Mrs. Clement burned the first letter." "Yes. But you told the constable you didn't see it." Ellis hesitated. "I remembered later." Marple's voice stayed even. "Memories are like soil, Mr. Ellis. They show what's been planted." He looked away. Slack exhaled through his teeth. "We'll sort him soon enough." Marple turned another page. "Before you do, consider this." She lifted a sheet of paper, the ledger's cover page. The ink along one edge was smeared. A fingerprint smudged in the corner. She passed it to Slack. "Compare that." Slack studied it, frowned. "Not Ellis," he said. "Too fine. Smaller hand." Marple nodded once. Then someone else handled it. Ellis looked up sharply. "Who?" "Someone trying to make you look guilty." Slack frowned. "You're saying he's not the one?" "I'm saying his fear was used," Marple replied. "He fixed the gate because someone asked him to. He delivered a message he didn't write." Ellis's mouth fell open. "Message?" "The letter," she said. "You left it at my door." "You didn't write it, but you placed it there." He shook his head. "I swear I didn't." Then he stopped. The realization crossed his face like a shadow. Marple's tone stayed calm. "You didn't mean to lie. You only repeated what you were told." Slack stood. "Then who sent him?" Marple looked toward the window. "The one person we haven't questioned. The one with clean hands and no alibi, Raymond Kerr." Ellis's voice broke. "He said it was just a warning. Said no one would get hurt." Slack froze. "He admitted that to you?" "Yes," Ellis whispered. "Said she only needed scaring." Marple's gaze sharpened. "But she wasn't the only one there." Ellis frowned. "What do you mean?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Unless the wrong person was meant to die." The faint scent of ashes lingered in the cottage. Miss Marple sat alone again, notebook open, pen steady. She wrote slowly, each line like a piece being placed. "Facts first. Mrs. Clement was meant to be frightened, not killed." Ellis delivered a message, thinking it harmless. Kerr arranged the warning but stayed unseen. Then came the fire, quick, precise, silent. Marple turned back a page. The key, the letters, the scarf, all threads. But one detail still refused to fit. The footprints. 2 sets left the shed. Only one returned. She drew them again, marking direction and size. The larger prints belonged to a man. The smaller, not Mrs. Clement's. Too narrow, too light. Someone else had been there with her. The thought repeated quietly. 2 people. One meant to be scared, one not meant to be there at all. Marple leaned back, eyes half closed. Who else had reason to visit that night? Not Mrs. Dodds. She feared the dark. Not the postman. And certainly not Inspector Slack. Then she remembered the gloves. Lady Bantry's gloves, left on the chair that morning. She had visited early, said she came for tea, but she'd been at the cottage long before the others arrived. Marple's pen stopped moving. The missing photograph taken from her own sideboard showed Mrs. Clement and her late husband at the firm's opening. In the corner stood Raymond Kerr and Lady Bantry beside him. A connection everyone had overlooked. Bantry's husband had once invested in Kerr's company. When the accounts collapsed, it was written off as bad luck. But bad luck doesn't leave two sets of footprints. Marple rose and walked to the window. The morning mist had not yet lifted. She watched the villagers pass, their heads bowed together. Gossip again, but gossip told truth sideways. She whispered to herself. Kerr planned the threat. Ellis delivered it. But someone else arrived unexpectedly and saw too much. Lady Bantry had claimed to be home that evening, but Slack's notes said otherwise. A maid had seen her coat missing after supper. Bantry later explained she'd stepped out for fresh air. Marple's fingers rested lightly on the page. Fresh air, a phrase used by both women Bantry and Clement, both meaning the same thing, both hiding unease. Logic arranged itself like clockwork. Mrs. Clement confronted Kerr by the shed. Bantry arrived soon after, to warn or to beg. Ellis waited nearby, unaware of who was who. The light, the scarf, the noise chaos born of fear. One push, one scream, one spark. Accident became death in a single second, and Kerr let the lie grow. Marple underlined 3 words: fear, money, silence. Then she drew a single circle around them all. She looked up from the page. Her voice was quiet, but certain. She saw it clearly now. The pattern in the lies. The room was quiet. The clock ticked steadily. Inspector Slack stood near the door. Constable Ward held his notebook. Mrs. Dodds waited by the hearth. Mr. Ellis stared at the floorboards. Lady Bantry sat still. Raymond Kerr watched Miss Marple. One room, Marple said. One truth. She placed the brass key down. We proceed by steps. Logic only. Our facts begin with fear, she said. Mrs. Clement feared someone specific. She raised the folded slip. 2 letters prove knowledge, not panic. She set the paper beside the key. 1 burned, 1 delivered. Next, the shed, she continued. The scarf knot was forced. She turned to Slack. The fire began after death. Marple faced Ellis. You fixed the gate hinge. Ellis swallowed, then nodded. After dusk, Marple added. You were asked to help. Ellis spoke softly. He said it was harmless. His eyes shifted toward Kerr. Marple did not move. The ledger was hidden under the hatch. Stamped entries showed fraud. Kerr's initials marked pages. Kerr forced a smile. I deny that, Marple answered calmly. Your initials sit by corrections. She pointed once. Different ink, different day. Kerr shook his head. Coincidence. Now the timeline, Marple said. 3:30 a parcel. She nodded to Ward. Confirmed by the postman. Ward checked his notes. Marple continued. Dusk brought 3 people. She raised 3 fingers. Mrs. Clement, Mr. Ellis, Mr. Kerr. She turned toward Lady Bantry. A 4th arrived unexpectedly. Bantry's hands tightened. You went out for air. Her voice was careful. Briefly, Miss Marple. Marple replied evenly. Your gloves were here early. She tapped the chair arm. You visited before morning. Bantry looked away. I was worried, she said. About money. About gossip. Marple nodded once. Worry explains presence, she said. Not silence afterward. Marple arranged the items. Key, ledger, letter, scarf. Each speaks without emotion. She looked at Ellis. You delivered the letter. Ellis winced. He told me to. Marple turned to Kerr. You scripted the warning. Kerr's jaw tightened. Nonsense. Then the prince, Marple said. 2 sets left the shed. Only one returned. She raised her eyes. Who returned, Mr. Kerr? He said nothing. Mrs.? Clement confronted you, Marple said. She tapped the scarf. You seized it to silence. She tapped the ledger. You grabbed this to hide. She tapped the key. You lost this in haste. She tapped the letter. You used Ellis for cover. Kerr exhaled slowly. You cannot prove intent. Marple answered. Intent lives inside sequence. She moved one item forward. You visited last month. Another forward. You promised the lock stayed hidden. She placed the torn slip. Her note preserved that promise. Bantry spoke suddenly. Stop this, Raymond. Kerr's face hardened. Be quiet, Adele. Slack stepped forward. Confess now, he said. Kerr stared at the ledger. She threatened everything, he muttered. Marple's eyes were steady. Why threaten fire as well? Kerr did not answer. The clock ticked. The room held its breath. Marple folded her hands. She looked up and said, You already know why. The smell of rain faded into damp air. Inspector Slack closed his notebook, slow and deliberate. Constable Ward gathered the evidence bags, scarf, key, papers. Everything was in order now. Kerr sat silent by the table. His signature on the confession looked thin, unfinished. Slack spoke quietly. It's done, Miss Marple. He's admitted to the fire. Marple nodded once. Admitted, yes, but not to motive. Ward sealed the envelope. The accounts match her records. Fraud, plain as day. Slack checked the ledger. Enough to hang him if it were 10 years earlier. Marple didn't answer. Her eyes lingered on the brooch lying on the tray. Its green stone caught the lamplight. Dull but steady. Ellis will walk free, Slack said. He was used, Marple replied. And Mrs. Dodds? She'll tell her stories, Marple said softly. Only this time they'll be true. The inspector looked toward the window. Outside, the village stirred again. Children ran past puddles. Shop doors opened. Life moved forward, as if nothing had happened. Slack's voice softened. You always see what we miss. Marple smiled faintly. Because you look for crime, I look for habit. He chuckled once. Habit nearly burned the village. Marple folded her notebook. And fear nearly destroyed 2 lives. Ward carried the box to the door. The clerk's ready for your statement, sir. Slack nodded. I'll follow shortly. When they were gone, the cottage grew still again. Marple placed the brooch inside a small cloth pouch. It no longer shone. She tied the string tight. She walked to the hearth and sat down. The kettle whistled softly on the stove. She poured a cup, stirred once, and let it cool. Justice had been done. But truth, she knew, never ended where law began. She looked at the empty chair across from her. Lady Bantry's gloves still rested there untouched. The memory of the footprints returned quietly to her mind. Logic said the case was closed. But logic rarely silenced instinct. One question still lingered in her mind. Morning light touched the lace curtains. Steam rose gently from Miss Marple's cup. Lady? Bantry sat opposite, hat in her lap. The air smelled faintly of toast and lemon polish. So, Bantry said softly, it's over then? Marple stirred her tea once. Mostly. Bantry sighed. I still can't believe it. Raymond Kerr, a killer. Marple replied. Not a killer by intent, but by deceit. Bantry looked puzzled. You mean the fire wasn't planned? Marple shook her head. Fear creates accidents faster than malice. Bantry nodded slowly. And Ellis? He'll rebuild what trust remains. For a moment, they sat in quiet thought. A sparrow fluttered at the sill. The world, as always, seemed too calm after chaos. Bantry smiled faintly. You always find sense in nonsense. Marple returned the smile. Because nonsense leaves tracks, my dear. She lifted her cup, eyes thoughtful. Truth cools slower than tea, she said. It lingers, even after warmth is gone. Bantry tilted her head. Then you still doubt. Something? Marple's gaze moved to the window. Her expression softened, unreadable. Doubt, no, she said quietly. Observation, yes. The kettle hissed again, and Marple didn't move to pour. Soft, reflective pause. Welcome back to the curious case. I'm Davis. Now tell me which clue gave it away first. Was it the key in the ashes, the letter on the doorstep, or the scarf no fire could burn? Share your guess in the comments, I always read them. Every mystery leaves a trace, and every trace tells a story. So brew another cup, settle in and think it over, because tomorrow another kettle will boil. Soft voice. One quiet lane, one missing letter, one truth waiting beneath the postbox light. Next time in Street Mary Mead, a stranger's return stirs an old wound, and Miss Marple finds that memories, like letters, don't always stay lost. What would you do if a message meant for the dead arrived at your door? Stay close, dear listeners, and keep your tea warm, because another secret is already steeping. Fade out curiosity line.